Snow had been falling since morning, a slow and gentle drift that turned the narrow streets into pale rivers of ice. Ben pushed his old food cart along the stone path, its wheels squeaking with each turn. He wore a patched coat that had been mended so many times the stitches looked like a map of winding roads. Beside him walked Mina, his little daughter. Her scarf, 2 sizes too big, covered most of her face, leaving only her wide brown eyes visible. She held a small tin cup, swinging it gently as they walked. The cup was empty, but she liked to pretend she was catching snowflakes in it. "Is it far, Papa?" Mina asked, her voice muffled by the scarf. "Not far," Ben replied, trying to sound cheerful. His breath made little clouds in the air. "We'll set up at the market square just like always." The cart wasn't heavy, but it rattled with each bump in the road. Inside were 2 small pots of stew, one thick with beans and herbs, the other thinner, meant for those who could not pay much. A half loaf of bread sat on a wooden board beside a jar of salt. It wasn't much, but it was all Ben could offer today. The market square was quieter than usual. Most people stayed indoors on cold nights like this, but Ben knew a few faces would appear, people who had no warm home to return to, people who counted on his cart. He stopped near the old stone fountain at the center of the square. The fountain had been dry for years, but its shape gave shelter from the wind. Mina helped him set the cart's small wooden stand. She pulled out 2 stools from under the cart, one for him and one for her. Ben lit the small heating plate beneath the stew pot, and soon a soft steam began to rise. The smell of beans, garlic, and thyme spread slowly through the cold air. Mina's stomach growled quietly, but she didn't complain. She knew her father always waited until the very end of the night before eating, just in case someone else came who needed it more. "Remember," Ben said gently, "we share first, we eat last." Mina nodded. She had heard those words since she was small enough to be carried in his arms. A tall man, wrapped in a faded blue coat, shuffled toward them. Ben greeted him with a smile, serving him a ladle of the thinner stew. The man gave a few small coins in return, his hands shaking from the cold. Mina passed him a piece of bread with a soft, "Here you go." One by one, people came. A young miner with soot still on his cheeks, an old woman with a cloth bag full of broken toys, a boy carrying a sleeping puppy inside his coat. Ben spoke kindly to each one, never rushing them, never counting too closely what they paid. Sometimes they paid with coins, sometimes with nothing at all. By the time the sky deepened to a navy blue and the moon began to rise, the crowd had thinned. Mina sat on her stool, swinging her legs, her breath forming small white puffs. Ben checked the pots. Only a little stew remained, barely enough for one more bowl. He sighed quietly. That meant they would eat bread tonight, but that was fine. Bread was warm enough if you shared it. Just as he began to pack up, he noticed movement at the far end of the square. A figure stood partly hidden in the shadow of a building. The person did not move forward, but Ben could tell they were watching. "Mina," Ben said softly, "stay here by the cart." He walked a few steps toward the shadow, careful not to seem hurried. The closer he came, the more details he could see. It was a woman, tall, wrapped in a heavy cloak the color of deep green. Her hood was pulled low, hiding most of her face. Beside her stood a much smaller figure, a child perhaps, bundled in layers of cloth. "Evening," Ben said gently. "It's cold out. You should come closer to the fire." The woman hesitated. Her gloved hand rested lightly on the child's shoulder. Ben noticed the child's eyes, large and faintly glowing in the dim light, unlike any human eyes he had seen before. The woman finally stepped forward, but slowly, as if unsure whether she was welcome. The child clung to her side. "You look hungry," Ben said. "I have just enough left for one bowl." She did not answer right away. When she spoke, her voice was low and carried a soft accent. "You would give food to strangers?" Ben smiled. Food doesn't care who eats it. Neither do I. He led them back to the cart. Mina's eyes grew wide when she saw them, but she said nothing, only reached for the bread. Ben poured the last of the stew into a wooden bowl, letting the steam rise into the night air. He set it on the stand, added the bread, and slid it toward the woman and child. The woman looked at it for a long moment before guiding the child forward. The small hands reached out, cradling the bowl as if it were treasure. They sat on the edge of the dry fountain, sharing the meal slowly, piece by piece. As they ate, the woman's gaze rested on Ben. Her hood shifted slightly, and for a moment he caught the faint shimmer of scales along her cheek, like silver threads in the moonlight. Her lips curved in the smallest smile. "Warm soul," she murmured, almost to herself. Ben didn't understand, but the tone was gentle, almost grateful. He gave a small nod in return, pretending he hadn't heard, so she would not feel watched. The square was silent, except for the soft sound of eating and the occasional gust of wind. The night felt deeper now, the stars brighter. Ben thought of the long walk home, of the bread waiting for Mina and himself, and of the two strangers who might have been colder and hungrier than anyone else tonight. It didn't matter to him where they came from or why they were here. On a winter night, kindness was worth more than any answer. The market square had grown quieter. The last few stalls were closing, their owners wrapping cloth over crates and pulling carts down side streets. The air carried the scent of snow and wood smoke, drifting from chimneys in the houses beyond. Ben stayed beside his cart a little longer, partly because it was warmer near the small cooking plate, and partly because he was curious about the cloaked woman and her child. Mina leaned close to him, her small hand tucked into his coat pocket for warmth. The woman sat very still on the fountain's stone ledge. She didn't look around much, as if she was careful not to draw attention. The child sat beside her, holding the empty wooden bowl in both hands, as though afraid to let it go. Ben took the bowl gently and smiled. "Did you like it?" The child nodded once, eyes wide. There was something strange about those eyes. They were deep and bright at the same time, catching every bit of light in the square. They seemed curious, but also watchful, as if always ready to hide. Mina came closer, peeking out from behind her father. "What's your name?" she asked softly. The child tilted their head but didn't speak. The woman gave a small shake of her head as though words were not yet safe. Ben understood. "It's all right," he said. "No need to talk if you don't want to." For a while, no one spoke. Snow fell in light flakes, catching in Mina's scarf and the woman's green hood. Ben could hear the faint clink of metal as the woman adjusted, something beneath her cloak. But it was small and quiet, like the sound of a chain brushing against cloth. Finally, the woman said, "We are far from home." Her voice had a soft rhythm, each word carefully chosen. "The road is long. The nights are colder than we knew." "You're welcome to stay by the heat for a while," Ben replied. "No one should walk far in this weather." Her gaze moved between Ben and Mina. "You give food to strangers, that is rare." Ben gave a short laugh. "I give food to anyone who's hungry. Doesn't matter if they're strangers or not." The woman lowered her head slightly, a gesture. That felt almost like a bow. She reached into the folds of her cloak and took out a small object, a round coin unlike any Ben had seen. It was dark metal, with lines and curves etched into it like flowing rivers. "I have no coins from this place," she said, "but this may hold worth." Ben held up his hands. "Keep it. You may need it more than I do." Her brow furrowed slightly, as if she couldn't understand why someone would refuse payment. The child looked between them, then tucked the coin back into the woman's cloak. From somewhere down the road, a distant sound rose, low, rhythmic thuds like boots on stone. The woman's head turned sharply toward it, her posture tightening. Ben noticed. Something wrong? She didn't answer right away. We have been followed before, she said finally. We travel quickly, but sometimes the road remembers us. Mina looked up at her father, unsure what the words meant. Ben knelt beside his daughter and spoke quietly. It's all right. We'll just wait here a little longer. The footsteps grew louder for a moment, then faded again. The woman's shoulders eased slightly, but she did not fully relax. She reached into a side pouch and took out a small cloth bundle, unwrapping it to reveal a soft, flat bread. She tore it in half, handing one piece to the child, who began nibbling. In small bites. You must be careful, Ben said gently. The market isn't always friendly to newcomers. Her eyes met his for the first time in full light. They were not like human eyes, slightly larger, with a faint glimmer along the edges, almost like silver dust. We are careful, she said. But kindness like yours, we do not often meet it. Ben felt a quiet warmth in his chest at her words. He didn't need thanks, but the way she said it made him feel as though what he had done truly mattered. A breeze swept through the square, colder now, carrying fine snowflakes that landed on the woman's cloak and the child's hair. Ben glanced at Mina, who had started shivering again. You live far from here? The woman asked. Not too far, Ben replied. Small place near the hill. She seemed to think about that for a moment. Do you walk alone at night? Sometimes, Ben said. It's quiet and I like the air. Besides, no one bothers someone pushing an old food cart. The woman's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. Perhaps they should. Mina tugged at her father's coat. Papa, can we give them the extra scarf? The one in the cart? Ben's face softened. Of course. He opened the small storage compartment beneath the stand and took out a scarf of thick wool. It was faded but warm. Mina handed it to the child, who hesitated before wrapping it around their neck. The woman watched, saying nothing, but her gaze softened in a way that didn't need words. More snow began to fall, heavier now, the flakes, swirling under the street lamps. Ben knew the weather would only get worse. You should find shelter soon, he said. The wind will be strong by midnight. She gave a slow nod. We will move, but first, thank you. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made Ben pause. He had given food to many people before, but this felt different. It was as if the thanks came from a place far deeper than hunger. As she stood, the folds of her cloak shifted, and for a moment Ben caught a glimpse of something metallic along her side, a long shape wrapped in cloth, with the faint outline of a hilt. But the wind blew again, and the cloak hid it from view. The child stepped close to Mina and pressed something into her mittened hand, a small bead, smooth and glowing faintly like moonlight trapped in glass. Mina looked at it with wide eyes, but before she could speak, the woman gently guided the child toward the edge of the square. Ben and Mina watched them go, their shapes fading into the white curtain of snow. The market was nearly silent now. Only the sound of the wind remained. Ben packed up the cart slowly, his thoughts lingering on the strange pair and the quiet feeling that tonight had changed something, though he couldn't yet name what. The snow was falling thicker now, and the wind carried it in little whirls that danced across the street. Ben had almost finished closing the cart when he noticed movement again at the far end of the square. Through the haze of white, the cloaked woman and her child had returned. They moved quickly this time, as if the cold had urged them back. The woman's green cloak was dotted with fresh snow, and the scarf Mina had given the child was pulled up close to their chin. Ben paused with his hands on the cart's side. I thought you'd gone to find shelter. We tried, the woman said quietly, but the doors we found were closed to us. Ben looked at Mina, who was already pulling the small breadboard from the cart's shelf. The loaf was not much, Half of it had been kept for their own supper, but Ben knew what Mina was thinking before she spoke. "Papa," she said softly, "we still have the bread." He gave a short nod. "Yes, we do." The woman watched silently as Ben took the bread in both hands. He broke it into 3 even pieces, handing one to Mina. The second piece he held out to the woman. The third, the smallest, he kept for himself. The woman hesitated. "You have not eaten yet." Ben smiled faintly. "That's all right. Bread tastes better when it's shared." She took the piece slowly as though it were something rare and precious. The child reached for it at once, but the woman broke it in half, giving one part to the small hands and keeping the other for herself. They sat together on the low stone edge of the dry fountain. Mina sat beside the child, their boots touching. Snow collected on their coats and scarves, but none of them seemed to mind. The bread was soft in the middle and slightly crisp at the edges. They ate slowly, letting each bite linger. "You make this yourself?" the woman asked after a moment. "Sometimes," Ben replied. "Today it was from a baker down the street. I trade stew for bread when I can." The woman nodded, studying him for a moment longer. Her eyes reflected the lamplight, silver and steady. "You give much for one who has little." Ben looked at Mina. "I've learned that if you have just enough, you already have more than someone else." The child tilted their head as if trying to understand the words. Then, after a pause, they tore a small piece of their bread and held it out to Mina. "For you," the child said in a voice so soft it was almost lost in the wind. Mina's smile was wide as she took it. "Thank you." She didn't eat it right away, instead tucking it into her mitten to keep it safe, as if the little gift was worth more than the whole loaf. The air between them felt warmer somehow, though the wind still moved around the square. Ben leaned back slightly, his eyes on the woman. "Do you have far to travel?" "Far," she said, her gaze drifting toward the snowy streets beyond. "There are places where we may be safe, but they are not near, and there are those who do not wish us to reach them." Ben thought of the heavy footsteps he'd heard earlier. "The ones you feared?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she looked at Mina and the child. "It is better for the young to walk under open skies, not in shadows." Mina tilted her head. "You talk like stories." The woman's lips curved faintly. "Perhaps. In my home, we carry stories like bread. They feed the heart." Ben liked that thought. For a while, they ate in silence, each bite of bread soft and steady. The woman's movements were careful, almost graceful, as though every small act, breaking the bread, brushing snow from the child's hair, was part of something important. The snowstorm softened for a few minutes, and the moon appeared between the clouds, its light turning the square into a pale silver stage. The woman looked up at it for a long time, her expression unreadable. The child leaned against her side, their eyes half closed, content from the small meal. "You could come with us," Ben said quietly. "Our home is small, but it's warmer than this square." The woman shook her head. "We cannot stay in one place too long." Ben didn't press her. He could see there was something she wasn't saying, and he respected that. Still, he felt a quiet pull inside. Something about this woman and child made him want to keep them safe, even if he didn't know their full story. The bread was finished, now. The child brushed crumbs from their scarf. Mina offered her last tiny piece to them, but they shook their head and smiled shyly. Ben stood dusting snow from his coat. "I'll walk with you part of the way, then. It's not good to travel, alone at night." The woman's gaze lingered on him for a moment before she nodded. "We will accept that." They began to walk together, the cart creaking softly behind them. The streets were empty, only the snow-covered lamps watching their passing. Mina and the child walked ahead, their small shapes side by side, leaving twin trails of footprints in the fresh snow. Ben walked beside the woman. "Your child. They seem strong." "They are," she said simply. "But they are also still learning the ways of this world." Ben thought of his own daughter. Of all, the nights they'd walked home together, her small hand warm in his. "Then we'll try to make this world a little kinder for them." The woman glanced at him then, her eyes steady and strange in the moonlight. "Kindness is a blade few know how to carry. You carry it well." He wasn't sure what to say to that, so he only smiled. When they reached the end of the square, the woman stopped. "We must go this way," she said, pointing to a narrow street between tall buildings. Ben hesitated. "Are you sure it's safe?" "No place is certain," she replied. "But we have to keep moving." Mina and the child looked back, their breath puffing white in the air. Ben gave a small nod. "All right. Keep the scarf and keep the warmth." The woman's eyes softened. "And you?" Ben of the small cart. "Keep the warm soul." She turned then, leading the child into the narrow street. Snow swallowed their shapes quickly until they were gone. Ben stood there a moment longer, the wind tugging at his coat. Mina slipped her hand into his. "Will we see them again, Papa?" Ben looked at the place where they had vanished. "Maybe. The world has strange ways of crossing paths." They turned toward home, the breadboard empty but their hearts full, and the snow fell quietly behind them. The next evening, the sky was clear, and the moon hung low, casting long silver shadows over the streets. The snow from the night before had settled into soft mounds along the stone paths. Ben pushed his cart slowly toward the market square again, his boots crunching through the thin frost. Mina skipped a little beside him, humming a tune she had learned from the woman the night before. It wasn't a song Ben knew, but the soft rise and fall of the melody stayed in his mind. "Do you think we'll see them again, Papa?" Mina asked. Ben gave a small smile. "I think so. Sometimes people return to the places where they found kindness." The market was busier that night, with more stalls open and lamps glowing warmly. The smell of roasting nuts and sweet bread filled the air. Ben set his cart near the fountain again, unpacked the stools, and lit the heating plate. Steam soon drifted from the pot of stew, and the smell drew a few early customers. Mina handed out bread with her usual smile, and Ben ladled stew into bowls. He was greeting an old man with a wool cap when he noticed movement in the corner of his eye. Pakari, woman in the green cloak, was there, walking slowly toward the cart. The child was with her, still wrapped in the scarf Mina had given. Their eyes met Ben's, and the woman gave the smallest of nods, a quiet greeting. "You came back," Ben said as they reached the cart. "We remembered the warmth here," she replied. Ben motioned for them to sit on the stools. "Then you're welcome again." He served them a fresh bowl of stew, placing it on the stand. The child leaned forward eagerly, and the woman guided their hands carefully around the bowl. Mina sat on the edge of the fountain, watching them. "What's your home like?" she asked the woman. The woman's gaze softened, and for a moment she seemed far away. "It is a place of wide skies and rivers that shine in the sun. The nights there are not cold like this. We have gardens that sing with color." Mina's eyes widened. "Do the gardens really sing?" The woman smiled faintly. "Not in the way you think. But the wind there carries music when it moves through the leaves. If you stand very still, you can hear it." Ben listened quietly. He could tell the woman spoke of her home with care, but also with a hint of sadness, as if each word carried a memory she could not return to. "Why did you leave?" Mina asked. The woman's eyes met Ben's, and for a moment she didn't answer. Then she said, "Sometimes the road calls you, even when you do not wish to walk it." Ben understood that she was telling as much as she was willing, and he didn't press further. Instead, he asked, "And your child? Do they remember your home?" The woman glanced at the child, who was now dipping bread into the stew. They remember the light on the water and the sound of the birds in the morning, but they will know this world better in time. Mina and the child began to talk in small words and gestures. Mina told them about the hill behind her house, where the snow gathered in deep drifts, perfect for sliding down. The child listened carefully, their bright eyes never leaving Mina's face. The woman watched them for a while before turning to Ben. "Your daughter is strong." "She has to be," Ben said. "It's just the two of us." There was a pause. Then the woman spoke more softly. "It is the same for us." The words settled between them, carrying a weight they both understood. The market began to quiet as night deepened. The lamplight grew softer, casting golden halos on the snow. Ben's pot of stew was nearly empty when the woman finally set down her spoon. "You feed many here," she said. "I try," Ben replied. "Everyone deserves to eat, no matter who they are." Her gaze lingered on him. "Kindness can be costly." Ben shrugged slightly. "So can turning your back on someone who needs help." The woman tilted her head, studying him as though weighing his words. Then she said, "In my home, there is a saying, 'A warm soul lights the path even in the darkest forest.'" Ben gave a quiet chuckle. "That's a good saying." "It is not just words," she said. "Those who carry warmth are often the ones others follow, even if they do not know it." The child finished the last of the stew and wiped the bowl with the last piece of bread. Mina offered them a small cloth to clean their hands, and they accepted it with a shy nod. Snow began to fall again, soft and light this time. The woman pulled, her cloak more tightly around her shoulders. "We should move before the streets empty," Ben nodded. "Will you be all right?" "Yes," she said, though her voice carried a note of caution. "But if the wind changes, we may need to return." Then, "The cart will still be here," Ben said simply. She gave a small smile, the closest he had seen yet, and stood. The child came to Mina and pressed something into her mittened hand again. This time, a small stone, smooth and pale, with a tiny hole worn through it. "For luck," the child said quietly. Mina held it as if it were a treasure. "I'll keep. It's safe." The woman placed a hand on the child's shoulder and they began to walk away. Ben and Mina watched until their shapes blended into the snow and shadow once more. When the last of the market closed and the lamps dimmed, Ben packed the cart. The square was empty now, but the memory of the gentle conversation lingered, warm against the cold night. As they walked home, Mina looked up at her father. "Do you think they'll come back again?" Ben smiled faintly. "Some paths cross more than once, Mina. I think we'll see them again." The wind had a restless sound that night, sweeping through the market square and rattling the signs above the closed shops. Ben pushed his cart through the drifting snow, his boots leaving clear marks on the frosted stones. Mina walked close. Beside him, her scarf pulled up high, her small mittened hand holding on to the cart's edge. The air smelled faintly of smoke from a far-off chimney, but under it was another scent. Cold metal, sharp and strange. Ben couldn't place it, but it made him glance over his shoulder more than once. When they reached the square, it was almost empty. Only a few late vendors were packing up, their voices carrying softly in the cold air. Ben set his cart near the fountain as always, though the night felt different somehow, as if the snow itself was listening. They had just lit the heating plate when a shadow moved near the far edge of the square. The green cloak was unmistakable. The woman was walking quickly, her child just a step behind. Snowflakes clung to their clothes, and the scarf around the child's neck fluttered in the wind. "You're here," Ben said as they approached. "Yes," the woman replied. "We walked far today, but the road was unsettled." Her eyes flicked toward the street they had come from, and Ben noticed she was holding the child's hand tightly. Unsettled how? He asked. She paused, as if weighing her words. We were not alone on the road. The sound of steps behind us came and went. The air felt watched. Mina's eyes widened. Someone was following you? The woman didn't confirm or deny it. Instead, she glanced around the square, her gaze moving carefully from one corner to the next. Ben served them stew, though his hands moved a little faster than usual. "You're safe here," he said. The woman gave a small nod, but her shoulders didn't relax. She let the child sit on the stool beside Mina while she remained standing, her cloak wrapped tightly around her. For a few minutes, they ate in quiet. The only sounds were the clink of spoons against bowls and the low sigh of the wind. Then, faint at first, came the sound, slow, heavy steps echoing down one of the side streets. Ben looked up. The woman's head turned sharply toward the sound, her eyes narrowing slightly. The child froze, bread halfway to their mouth. The steps grew louder, steady and unhurried, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. Mina glanced at her father. "Papa?" she whispered. "It's all right," Ben said gently, though he wasn't sure it was. The woman stepped forward slightly, her cloak shifting with the movement. Beneath it, Ben caught the faint outline of something long and narrow, wrapped in cloth. She kept her voice calm but firm when she spoke to him. "Stay, near the child," she said. "Do not move away from the cart." Ben hesitated. "What about you?" "I will stand here," she replied, turning toward the street. The footsteps were close now, just beyond the edge of the square. A shape began to form in the dim light, tall, broad-shouldered, with something slung across its back. Ben felt Mina press against his side. The child moved closer to her, their small hand gripping her mitten. The woman's cloak opened slightly, and Ben saw the wrapped object in her hand, a sword, though he could only see the hilt and a hint of the sheath. The metal glinted faintly in the lamplight before the wind tugged the cloak back into place. The figure stopped at the edge of the square. For a long moment, no one moved. Snow swirled between them, soft but steady. Ben couldn't see the person's face. The hood of their coat was pulled low. The only thing visible was the way they stood, solid, still, as if waiting for something. The woman's voice broke the silence, low but clear. "The road is wide. Choose another path." The figure didn't answer. A gust of wind swept across the square, carrying more snow. When it cleared, the figure had stepped back into the shadows. Slowly, their shape melted into the white and gray until there was nothing there at all. The woman kept her gaze fixed on the spot for a while longer, then lowered her shoulders slightly. She didn't put the sword away, but she eased her grip on it. "They are gone," she said, though her tone suggested it might only be for now. Ben exhaled, only then realizing how tense he'd been. Mina still held the child's hand, both of them watching the street where the stranger had stood. "Do you think they'll come back?" Mina asked quietly. The woman looked at her, then at Ben. "Perhaps, but for tonight the snow hides more than it shows." They finished the stew, though the warmth of it could not quite chase away the feeling the stranger's presence had left. When it was time to leave, the woman walked with them for a short while before turning toward a different road. "Keep to the light," she told Ben. "And you?" he asked. She gave the faintest smile. "The shadows are not strangers to me." With that, she and the child stepped away, their figures soon swallowed by the falling snow. Ben and Mina continued home, the cart's wheels creaking softly behind them. But that night, as Ben lay awake listening to the wind, he couldn't help but wonder who had been watching and why. The snow was falling in slow, heavy flakes that evening, each one catching the yellow light of the market lamps before settling on the ground. The square was quieter than usual, and the fountain's stone rim was hidden beneath a smooth white layer. Ben pushed his cart into place, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Mina walked beside him, holding the scarf the woman's child had given her. She wore it around her neck now, as if it were a charm. The wind seemed sharper that night. It moved in short bursts, tugging at coats and whispering through the empty streets. Ben set up his cart quickly, feeling the air's restlessness. He wasn't sure why, but the stillness in the square felt like the pause before something important. It wasn't long before the green cloak appeared again. The woman stepped into the light, her child beside her. The scarf Mina had given the child was wrapped tightly, and their cheeks were red from the cold. "You're here," Ben said with a small smile. The woman nodded. The road was empty tonight. That does not mean it was safe. Ben didn't have to ask what she meant. He still remembered the shadowed figure from the other night. They sat together near the cart, and Ben served them warm stew. Mina handed the child a piece of fresh bread, and the two began to speak in quiet voices, sharing simple words about the snow and the market lights. Then it came again, the sound of steps. This time they weren't slow or hesitant. They were steady, purposeful, drawing closer from one of the narrow side streets. The woman looked toward the sound at once. Her posture changed, still calm but ready, like a tree that bends with the wind without breaking. Ben's hand tightened on the edge of the cart. Mina stopped speaking and turned to look at the street. The child's hand slid into hers without a word. The steps grew louder until a shadow appeared at the far edge of the square. It was the same tall shape as before. The hood still hid the face, but the stance was the same, solid, unmoving, as if measuring the space between them. The woman stepped forward. Her cloak moved with the wind, and for the first time Ben saw the sword in her hand, uncovered. Its hilt was simple, the metal worn smooth from years of use. She planted the tip gently into the snow, both hands resting on the top. Her voice was calm when she spoke, but it carried clearly through the quiet air. "This is not your path. Go another way." The figure did not move. Snow swirled between them, drifting across the ground in pale ribbons. The market lamps flickered slightly in the wind. Ben felt his heart beating faster. He kept Mina close, standing between her and the stranger. The child stayed beside Mina, their bright eyes fixed on the woman's back. For a long moment, no one spoke. The square felt like it was holding its breath. The woman's voice came again, just as steady. "You will find no gain here. Only a cold road and an empty hand." Still, the figure didn't answer. Ben realized then that this was a kind of standoff, not with shouting or force, but with patience. The woman stood like a pillar, her sword an anchor in the snow. The stranger seemed to be waiting for something, but whatever it was, it didn't come. Finally, the hooded head turned slightly, as if listening to something far away. The figure stepped back, slow and measured, until the shadows of the narrow street swallowed them once more. The wind moved through the square again, carrying the faint sound of a creaking sign somewhere down the road. The woman waited a few more seconds before lifting the sword from the snow. She turned and walked back to the cart, her face unreadable. "They are gone," she said. "For now." Ben let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Mina's small hand was still gripping his coat. The child loosened their hold on her and gave a tiny nod as if to reassure themselves. "What do they want?" Ben asked quietly. The woman shook her head. "Some roads cross for reasons we cannot see yet." Ben didn't press further. He knew some answers were only given in time. They stayed in the square a little longer, finishing the stew and bread. But the night felt different now, quiet yet alert, as if the snow itself was watching. When it was time to leave, the woman walked with them part of the way. She carried the sword openly now, the moonlight catching along its edge. At the point where their paths split, she stopped. "The road to your home is safe tonight," she said. "Walk in the light." Ben looked at her. "And you?" Her lips curved slightly. "I will walk where the shadows go." The child stepped forward, placing something in Mina's mitten again, a tiny shell, smooth and white, with a faint silver line running through it. "For your pocket," the child said. Softly, Mina smiled. "I'll keep it safe." The woman nodded once to Ben, then turned and walked away, her cloak trailing in the snow. The child followed, their small steps leaving neat marks beside hers. Ben and Mina watched them until the shapes faded into the dark. Then they continued home, the cart's wheels creaking softly, the square behind them returning to its quiet stillness. The night sky was clear for the first time in many days. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the rooftops shining under the moonlight. Stars dotted the sky, bright and steady, as if they were keeping watch over the sleeping town. Ben pushed his cart along the quiet street. Mina walked beside him, her scarf wrapped snugly, the little white shell tucked safely in her pocket. The market had been calm that evening, without the sound of unknown footsteps. But the memory of the shadowed figure still lingered in the back of Ben's mind. The woman and her child had not come that night. Their absence felt like a missing note in a familiar song. Ben tried to tell himself they had simply taken a different road, but the cold air carried a sense of distance, as if part of the world had stepped away. When they reached home, Ben unpacked the cart, while Mina sat at the small table, humming softly. She pulled the shell from her pocket and set it on the table, turning it so the silver line caught the lamplight. "Do you think they're safe?" she asked. Ben looked at her and gave a small smile. "I think they're strong, and strong people find their way, even when the road is not easy." But later, when Mina was asleep, Ben found himself standing by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The moon was high, and the snow reflected its light in a soft glow. He stayed there for a long time, as if expecting to see a green cloak appear at the corner. The next evening, he returned to the square. The air was colder, but clear. The fountain was half covered in ice, and the lamps flickered gently in the breeze. As he set up his cart, he heard footsteps, but they were lighter, quicker, and came from behind. "Papa!" Mina called. He turned to see her running toward him, holding something in her mittened hands. She opened them to reveal a folded scrap of cloth. Deep green, the same color as the woman's cloak. "Where did you get this?" Ben asked softly. "It was on the bench by the fountain," Mina said. "And there was this, too." She held up a small piece of paper, folded neatly. Ben unfolded it. The handwriting was graceful but firm, and the words were simple. "The road calls us far, but the light of your kindness will guide us back. Keep the shell safe. We will meet again when the snow is softer." He read it twice, then tucked it carefully into his coat. The words carried no date, no promise of exactly when, but they were enough. That night, the market was quiet. Ben and Mina shared stew under the stars, the little green cloth folded beside them. He kept glancing toward the streets, not with worry this time, but with patience. Winter days passed, slow and steady. The snow began to melt at the edges, revealing patches of earth beneath. The air softened, carrying the first faint hints of spring. Each evening, Ben returned to the square, setting up the cart as always. Mina grew into the habit of looking down each road when they arrived, her eyes bright with hope. The green cloth stayed in her pocket now, alongside the shell, as if carrying both would bring their friends back sooner. One evening, the lamps lit early, Ben noticed something new on the fountain's rim. A row of small, smooth stones, each a different color. They had not been there the night before. Mina spotted them too, her smile widening. "They're close," she whispered. Ben nodded. He couldn't explain how he knew, but her words felt true. It was 2 nights later when the familiar shape appeared at the far end of the square. The green cloak moved through the lamplight, the child walking beside her. Their steps were steady, unhurried, as if the miles between then and now had been nothing more than a dream. Mina ran forward, stopping just short of the woman, her mittened hands clasped together. The child smiled shyly, then pulled something from their own pocket. A second shell, this one pale gold. "For your other pocket," they said softly. Ben walked up, meeting the woman's gaze. "You came back." "As I said," she replied, her tone calm but warm. "The road does not forget those who walk it with care." They sat together by the cart once more, sharing food as the stars shone overhead. The square felt full again, as if every lamp burned a little brighter. Later, as they prepared to part for the night, the woman rested a hand briefly on Ben's shoulder. "The snow will return," she said. "When it does, we may have to walk far again, but some roads are worth crossing many times." Ben understood. This meeting might not be their last, but it would not be forever either. That was the nature of certain friendships. They came and went like seasons, yet always left the heart warmer than before. When the woman and her child left the square, Mina stood watching until the green cloak was only a speck in the distance. She slipped her hands into her coat pockets, feeling the 2 shells. "Papa," she said, smiling, "I think they'll come back again." Ben looked up at the sky, where the stars seemed to shine with quiet certainty. "Yes," he replied, "I think so too." And somewhere on a road beyond the hills, under the same stars, the woman's voice carried softly to her child.